You haven't said hi to the Dickinson fans in a while. Can you say hello? No? Are you feeling camera shy? Now you want to pose? You want to pose? Yeah. Ooh, she's photogenic. Hi, I'm LadyJenevia. Welcome back to my weekly reviews of Dickinson Season 2. We are very close to being finished with this season, which is exciting. Now that we're finally starting to get more answers to the questions that people have been asking, there are a lot of things that we are able to talk about more in depth. I'm going to have to hop around a fair bit because there isn't as neat a way to go through character by character because there are some big moments that involve an overlap between characters that have their own individual arcs. So bear with me, I have tried to organize it as best as I can. The first point I want to address is something that I was talking about a fair bit in my last review. John Brown. When I wrote my spoiler review of episode 8, I didn't remember that they were going to talk about the raid on Harper's Ferry in this episode. I just knew that I wanted to understand the deeper layers of the material of episode 8 and offer that insight to those of you that are nice enough to tune in week after week to hear my commentary about the show. When I was looking up all of this information about John Brown and what he believed, what he did, and the way those actions of his had such a massive impact on the trajectory of certain socio-political ongoings of that time, I figured that by sharing this, I would be letting all of you know that, hey, this is a really cool historical figure that you could learn about if you're not already familiar. History is not boring, and also it could hint at what direction I think the show might be going in. Like I said last week, historians have come to the consensus that John Brown's actions played a significant role in the Civil War kicking off. In this latest episode of Dickinson, episode 9, Sam is talking about John Brown, the abolitionist. He's saying that all of John Brown's collaborators will be found out. And this is bad news for Austen because he has been helping Henry to do a lot of things with his civil rights newspaper, which was used to raise funds that were sent to John Brown to help him with that attack on Harper's Ferry. It was really sad to see Henry leave. By far, his subplot was my favorite part of this season. I think maybe more viewers have started to understand why I have advocated for Austen in season 2 when I first started posting reviews of this season. This exchange between Austen and Sam is when we really see this stark contrast between the two of them. On the one hand, we have Sam saying, "War sells papers, my friend." And on the other hand, we have Austen, who does not like the idea of profiting from war because he has principles. I don't entirely know the ages of the people that have started keeping up with my Dickinson reviews, but it seems like on average, the age skews a bit on the younger side, and I don't know how much those of you that are younger are thinking about things like the ethics of journalism, particularly as it relates to socio-political injustice. I don't think that I thought about those things as much when I was younger, but the world's socio-political climate also didn't feel as bleak then as it does now. What I will say, though, is that for Sam to be so brazenly talking about how war will be good because war sells papers, this is hitting on so many contemporary issues. We have very biased misinformation getting blasted all over the internet with little to no effort made by CEOs to get the problem under control. Yes, I'm looking at you, Mark Zuckerberg. We have the unwillingness of major news platforms to take a stand and condemn full-on supremacists, fascists, and Nazis. Sorry for all the extra muting, by the way, but the YouTube bots can be fussy about which words will set them off and do things like age restrict, so I'm just taking precautions. When Sam talks about not wanting to be too progressive when reporting on a potential war to do with abolition because he doesn't want to alienate the more moderate or conservative readers, You cannot come to any other conclusion about what the writers are addressing on this show. The right thing for him to do is to condemn slavery because it's a very bad thing. Austen has done that in his own way by using his privilege and his resources to help Henry. Sam doesn't care. That's why he says the strategy is to not alienate their moderate or even conservative-leaning readers. It's not about being on the right side of history. It's about making money. Speaking of Sam, by the way, for a while now, a lot of viewers, including myself, have been wondering, why was Sam just sitting around when he should have been publishing Emily's poem? I got a comment on one of the reviews that I posted last week that said something to the effect of, did you notice that Sam didn't publish Emily's poem until her father invested in his paper? I have to say I'm thoroughly impressed by the fandom of Dickinson. This is a group of people that pays a lot of attention to detail. It's really cool to see everyone forming their own theories over the course of the season as each new episode has aired. Not every guess that has been made has been accurate, but some of them have. Like I said last week, a fair few people had figured out that Sam and Sue were having an affair. I didn't pick up on that the first time I watched season 2 because I was binging press screeners, so I didn't have the time to soak in every detail and ponder everything before going on to the next one. Speaking of Sue, let's talk about her material. I know a lot of you just want Emily and Sue to have scenes together and get upset when an episode goes by without the two of them having scenes together, but Sue's material in this episode is very important. I have seen a lot of strong reactions in my comments and on Twitter where people are upset with Sue for what she's done, or they're upset at the writers because they think that those writers have ruined her character. Respectfully, you're wrong. You are being too hasty in your judgment, particularly when you are only saying this in the heat of the moment after a big dramatic reveal that came at the end of episode 8. I responded to multiple comments and tweets after episode 8 aired, basically telling people that they just need to finish the season. A lot of people didn't understand why Sue was doing what she was doing. Her material in this episode, episode 9, is peeling back a lot of layers on what is going on with her. We already knew she was carrying traumas in season 1, but season 2 opened with her talking to Emily about losing the baby. By the way, I got a comment last week asking me what happened to Sue's pregnancy, and I very politely told them that she had a miscarriage, and she talked to Emily about it in the library in the season 2 premiere. And see, this is why I've been recommending week after week that you should go back and rewatch the episodes during the week while you're waiting for the next one to air, because you never know, you might be missing something. There might be a detail that's just slipping past what you're noticing. Sue visits Mary, who has already been established at this point as being the only real friend Sue had before she met Emily. This is a pretty stomach-churning scene, but it's an important one because now we finally start to get a better sense of what has been going on with Sue. There's a lot to unpack in this scene, and I'm probably not going to go through every detail that I could, but next week when I do my spoiler review of episode 10, I will try to cover anything and everything that you want me to address. Just let me know in the comments, because at that point, there will be nothing left for me to tiptoe around. Mary is an important character because through her, we learn more about Sam and we learn more about Sue. Mary knows that Sam has a habit of cheating on her, and she knows he's getting up to yet another affair, but she doesn't know that it's happening with Sue specifically. There is a point in the scene where Sue brings up a happy memory from their childhood, but Mary points out that that memory was from around the time that her own father died. Sue also lost her family when she was young, but it was a different summer. So these two have more or less always had that in common. But then the scene progresses further and Mary reveals that even though Sam has been claiming that she didn't come out because she's been sick in a more general sense, she's not feeling well, In actuality, she had a miscarriage. That's why she's been staying home and not feeling well, though that's really underselling it. I've never had a miscarriage. I'm not going to even attempt to know what that's like to experience firsthand, but I don't think you have to have experienced a miscarriage firsthand to have empathy for how incredibly traumatic an experience it can be for the people who have had them. I don't remember exactly, but I think at some point over the course of me doing these reviews of Dickinson season 2, someone left a comment saying something about Sue and mirrors. We did have that one scene of her looking at herself in a mirror in the dress, and it was used in the promo. It was from much earlier on in the season. Well, I feel like Mary is acting as a human mirror for Sue. They have a lot in common: early childhood traumas where they lost family members, unhappy marriages, and of course, the big one, the miscarriage. Yes, we saw Sue talk about it with Emily, but there are clearly far more feelings and emotions that she has about this experience, and she's been burying them. Sue is seeing Mary in pain, and Mary is a woman with whom she has so much in common with, and this is someone whom she has cared for as a friend. So Sue is seeing everything she is experiencing internally within herself, but then she's not able to deny that this is there, like she's doing with her own pain and trauma, because this is something that is happening right in front of her face. So the way all of this is playing out is that this is a wake-up call for Sue. She realizes that she's been running away from what she went through, running away from dealing with it in a healthy way. I know a lot of people have not liked what Sue has been doing this season, particularly after finding out she was hooking up with Sam. What I would like for more people to understand about the way this character arc has been written and executed in the filmmaking is that when people are sad or in pain, it's pretty common for that to affect your behavior. It makes sense that a person who is in tremendous pain and running around with unresolved trauma is not always going to conduct themselves in a rational way. When your brain is experiencing more stress, it can impede your cognition. If any of you watched The Punisher on Netflix, Frank Castle's wife and kids got murdered, and then he turned into a violent vigilante seeking revenge on their behalf. When you really start to look at fiction through this lens, you will start to realize that unresolved trauma is a huge driving force in fictional characters and stories, because unresolved trauma is a huge driving force in a lot of people's lives in real life. Is Sue wrong to sleep with Sam? Yes. Is fiction really boring if everyone always does the right thing? Also, yes. You don't have to like anything Sue did this season, from the lying and the manipulation and the gaslighting and the cheating. I don't like how she conducted herself. I've made that pretty clear across my reviews. But if I am analyzing this on a technical level in regards to writing, this is a well-written character arc spanning across this season. You haven't seen all of it yet. There's still one more episode that you have to watch, so there are some things I'm waiting to talk about until next week. At least now I think more of you fans who stan Sue as a character have a clearer sense of why I've been saying that I don't like what she's doing this season, but you also don't have to be likable. That isn't what makes for good fiction. I know some of you have been upset with how Sue has been handled this season, but what you also have to remember is that you don't always know why people do the wrong thing. A lot of times in your life, you only see the bad things that people do without knowing the root cause of their behaviors, whether it's trauma. People often bury their pain to such an extent that they themselves might not even realize what is causing them to act the way that they do. It's usually childhood trauma. That's why a lot of times when I'm reviewing fiction, I end up telling characters to go to therapy. Therapy isn't always accessible to people depending on where you live and what your socioeconomic status is, but I am going to say that if you can go, go. Okay, that was a really long tangent. I'm aware. Now let's talk about Austin. The major development in this story that some of you did figure out because you were going back and rewatching the episodes is that he already knew Sue was having an affair with Sam. This is why when he and Jane kissed a few episodes back, I didn't rip into him as hard as I could have. I'm not excusing what he did, but the context is different if he's kissing another woman when he knows his wife is already cheating on him. The expression, an eye for an eye makes the world blind, comes to mind. Also, when they're at the opera and Sam comes over, Austin immediately excuses himself. He doesn't want to be anywhere near him. If you haven't already seen it, go back and rewatch it. He also leaves Sue at the opera to go meet up with his friend, whom we're going to be talking about in this review, but give me a bit to get there. He left Sue and basically told her she could go off with whomever. A lot of you were mad at him at the time, but now you know what he was really referring to. We're going to talk more about Austin, but first let's have a break because so much of this material has been very heavy. Let's talk about my favorite comedy duo, Lavinia and Ship. You all thought the little teaser of a spider dance thing that she did last week was epic? Nope. This was the moment. The way she absolutely did that for us, she knew we needed a pick-me-up while we're all feeling sad about the mess that everyone else on this show has gotten into. She served us up a rousing rendition of Lola Montez. She said, "Taste my whip." I love these two together, not necessarily as an ideal romantic couple, but for the entertainment value, absolutely. I was glad that this was how their episodic material ended up because I will admit there was a moment when I watched this episode for the first time when Ship was telling Lavinia's mother in the kitchen, "You're a domestic goddess, Mrs. D." I did wonder briefly if one of them was going to make a move on the other one, but thankfully it was just this really cute comedic moment of him telling her that he appreciates all the work she did for the 2 tea parties she threw. How many people said thank you to her? Clearly not enough. Mr. Dickinson certainly didn't. He still sucks. I don't like him, even if he did have a funny line at the beginning of this episode when Mrs. Dickinson was saying that she could throw 2 tea parties with her hands tied behind her back or something like that, and his response was, "There's no need for contortion." It was a good line. I still don't like him though. Sorry, not sorry. Let's talk a little bit about the tea parties though. There is a part where Ship is talking to his boys about how they could start getting together on a regular basis and record their conversations about politics. If you didn't already know this is very clearly a joke, making fun of how much people like to start podcasts nowadays. I still have never started a podcast. Keeping up with my channel is already more than enough for me to do. Another line that was said during these tea parties was, "The polls say no one wants war, and polls are never wrong." That is making fun of the 2016 US election when people were presuming that the polls were right and that the polls were saying that there was no way the tangerine predator was going to win, and we all know how that turned out. Register to vote. If you're not old enough and you're watching this, just wait for however long it takes for you to be old enough and then please register. These tea parties are brimming with socio-political commentary because even Mrs. Dickinson steps outside of her usual role of domesticity to drop a scathing mic drop line. "Well, in my opinion, maybe wars wouldn't happen if men simply had better manners." Where to even begin with this one? Well, a lot of sexists like to claim that women cannot be political leaders, and one of the arguments that has been thrown around when making this fallacious claim is that women would be too emotional when they're menstruating, so they could just up and start a war because they're menstruating. This was an argument that some people unironically threw around against Hillary when she was running back in 2016. Now, to be very clear, you don't have to like her politics to see that this argument is stupid. Most of the wars that are currently happening and have happened throughout history were started by whom? Men. Women are more than capable of being fantastic leaders. Look at how well New Zealand handled the Rona situation. And the leader of New Zealand is what? A woman. Gender does not dictate the quality of a leader. Also, not everyone who menstruates is a woman and not all women menstruate. Even if menstruation was that much of a threat to a person's cognitive capabilities as it applies to being a political leader of a nation, it would make very little sense to use this fallacious argument against Hillary.
But why would we expect people who are ignorant enough to think that menstruation is a valid strike against a political candidate to know what menopause is? Did I think that when I started writing this review that I would be going on a tangent about menstruation? Or as Johnny Nagarelli in Grease 2 delightfully mispronounces it, mentalstration? No, but here we are. Can you tell that 2021 is really bringing me down? Anyway, let's get back to talking about Austin. This is a big episode for him. Everything really comes to a head with his storyline. He has that confrontation with his father, where his father makes it clear that he knows about the forged painting, that he only made him a partner because of nepotism. Austin has gotten the wind taken out of his sails, so to speak. He's upset at his father investing with Sam Bowles, partially because of the money, but also because of the affair. But it's not as if he feels comfortable sharing that, because the last thing he's going to want his father to know is that in addition to being a failure on a financial business level, his marriage is also failing. I think the Tea Party is his way of trying to get some of the happiness he used to feel when life was more simple and he could just hang out with his friends, free from the worries he now finds himself having in his life. This is a great time to bring Emily into the review. Some of you seemed confused by her discovering that Sue and Sam had been having an affair, and you were trying to interpret that scene in a very literal way. But what you have to remember is that this season is really heavily embracing surrealism. If any of you have ever seen Amélie, that's a good reference for me to use, particularly since it's one of my favorite films. Sometimes you have to just follow the story and be open to it being presented in a way that is outside of the box. This is a storytelling style that defies convention. So Emily spends a significant portion of this episode, when it first starts, just moping on the floor. She is upset, and for good reason. When she finally gets up from the floor, she goes to see Austin and she tells him about the affair. That's when we learn that he already knew about it, but she also accidentally lets it slip that Sue had a miscarriage. This whole scene of Austin breaking down and Emily comforting him is one of my favorite scenes for Austin as a character and for the pair of them as siblings. From episode 8 and now episode 9, their content together is just really getting to me. He says to Emily, "I'm a failure. Nothing I do works. Everything I touch breaks. I've been trying so hard to find meaning, to find something that will make Sue love me, but nothing I do will ever matter. I'm a joke, a fraud, with a hole inside that nothing can ever fill." I know a lot of you didn't like Austin in season 1, and you often see him as just an obstacle to Emily and Sue being able to be together romantically. But if you didn't feel something for him in this scene, then I really have to question your capacity for empathy. Great stories in fiction will make you empathize with all kinds of characters. And this scene was beautifully written and it was beautifully performed. The final point worth mentioning about this episode is nobody. We seemingly now know who he is. Fraser Stearns. I think I got a comment last week where someone had figured out that nobody was Fraser, Austin's childhood friend, which is why Emily had the sense that she had seen him before, because she has. I think it's pretty clear now that part of what nobody's warnings were hinting at was the impending civil war. Fraser is training to be a soldier, so we know where his character is headed. It's pretty difficult to unpack all of what nobody represents across this season right now, particularly since this review is already quite long. But what's good about Fraser coming into the story is that he is another supportive person when it comes to Emily's poetry, and he is able to help her realize that she needs to get her poems back. This is a great setup for things to come in next week's season finale. So thank you for watching this video, everyone. Don't forget to like and comment. This was a difficult review to make because I've been really struggling emotionally and psychologically because of a lot of news stories that have been coming out. But I really wanted to make sure that I made this review. I didn't want to just up and disappear from my channel. I'm also not going to be doing a spoiler-free review of episode 10 because it seems like certain cast members have already been revealing kind of a lot about what's going to come in the season finale, and I would really rather just save all of my thoughts and talking points until I do my spoiler review, which I will post next week. There's going to be a lot to talk about, so subscribe so you don't miss my final review of Dickinson Season 2, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye.